November 27, 1950, Chosin Reservoir, North Korea, temperature -30 degrees Fahrenheit. Chinese soldiers peered through the frozen dawn at the American encampment below. Steam rose from their breath as they whispered and pointed. Some even laughed. 20,000 Marines, surrounded, cut off from supply lines. No way out but a frozen road stretching 78 miles to the sea. "Look at them," one Chinese officer reportedly said to his aide. "The Americans who drink Coca-Cola and eat ice cream. How long will they last in our mountains?" They were about to find out that Marines don't retreat. They advance in a different direction. Welcome back to the channel. Before we dive into one of the most brutal fighting withdrawals in military history, drop a comment with the word "Frozen Chosen" if you think the Marines earned that nickname the hard way. And hit subscribe, because this story will change how you see American resolve under fire. The myth was simple: pampered American boys versus hardened Asian fighters in their own backyard. The Chinese had studied American tactics for months. They knew about the helicopters, the close air support, the seemingly endless supply convoys. What they didn't understand was the Marine Corps itself. 1432 hours. Radio crackles across Marine positions scattered around the reservoir. All stations, this is Sword Base. Enemy movement observed. Grids 54 through 78. Stand by for fire mission. 1433 hours. Adjustments flow through the network. Roger, Sword Base. Marines in position. M1's loaded. We're ready. 1434 hours. The first wave hits. But this isn't the story of a last stand. This is the story of what happens when 20,000 Marines decide that frozen doesn't mean finished. Chapter 1. The Trap Springs. Staff Sergeant Robert Martinez pressed his eye to his rifle scope and felt the metal burn his skin in the sub-zero air. Around him, Marines of the 1st Battalion had carved fighting positions from ground so hard it shattered their entrenching tools. "How many do you count, Martinez?" Lieutenant Thompson's voice carried that steady calm that kept Marines alive. "Too many to count, sir. Maybe 300-400 just in our sector," Thompson nodded. He'd done the math. Intelligence reports put Chinese strength at 120,000 troops in the region. The 1st Marine Division, reinforced, numbered barely 20,000, 6-to-1 odds. In most armies, that would mean surrender or annihilation. Marines had a different interpretation. November 28th, so 300 hours. Map coordinates 41 degree yen, 127 degree E appears on screen. The Chinese struck in human waves exactly as their doctrine prescribed. Thousands of soldiers emerged from concealed positions, whistles shrieking, bugles blaring. The sound echoed off frozen ridgelines like some medieval nightmare.
"Here they come!"
Martinez shouted. The first lesson the Chinese learned was about the M1 Garand. At 100 yards, Martinez's rifle cracked 8 times in rapid succession. The distinctive ping of the ejecting clip rang out as he slammed home a fresh unblock of .30-06 ammunition. 8 rounds, 8 seconds, reload, repeat, multiply that by 20,000 Marines. "Targets falling back, Sector 7, radioed Corporal Williams from the eastern slope. But Martinez knew this was just the probe. The real attack would come at dawn. 347 hours timestamp flashes on frozen radio equipment. "Martinez, you seeing this?" Thompson pointed northeast. Through the pre-dawn darkness, thousands of small lights flickered across the ridgelines. Lanterns, torches. The Chinese weren't hiding anymore. "Jesus, Lieutenant. How many are out there?" "All of them, Sergeant. All of them." The Chinese had spent 3 months planning this encirclement. They'd moved 120,000 troops through mountain passes, carrying minimal supplies, accepting horrific frostbite casualties just to get into position. Their intelligence was perfect. Their trap was perfect. They'd made one crucial miscalculation. They thought Marines were just another American unit. Blood Chapter 2. Witness POV and first engagement. You are Staff Sergeant Martinez at 0600 hours, November 28th. The temperature is -35 degrees Fahrenheit. Your beard is frozen to your field jacket. The bolt of your M1 Garand is so cold it burns your fingers through wool mittens. But your rifle works. In Korea's killing cold, Chinese weapons jam. Soviet PPSH submachine guns seize up. Mosin Nagant bolts freeze shut. But the M1 Garand, with its heavy operating rod and simple gas system, cycles round after round. "Contact front!" Martinez shouted as the first wave of Chinese infantry crested the ridge. The Marines had learned something at Guadalcanal, Tarawa, Iwo Jima. When you're outnumbered, every shot counts. When you're surrounded, every position becomes a fortress. Telegraph timestamp 0617 hours. Chosin perimeter. Private Johnson. The radio operator pressed his handset and spoke in the calm, almost casual tone that marked Marine communications under fire. "Sword Base, this is Fox Company. We have approximately 400 enemy infantry 200 yards northeast of our position. Request immediate fire support. Roger, Fox Company. Steel rain inbound. 60 seconds. Martinez watched through his scope as Chinese soldiers advanced in perfect formation across the snow. They moved like they were on parade. Straight lines, precise intervals, officers with swords leading from the front. Professional soldiers, disciplined, fearless, also completely unprepared for what came next. The 105mm howitzer rounds arrived exactly 60 seconds later. Each shell burst in an orange flower of flame against the white snow. Shrapnel screamed through the air at 3,000 feet per second. But the Chinese kept coming. "Second wave bearing 040, Johnson called. Martinez shifted his aim. At 200 yards, he could see individual faces. Young men, most of them. Farmers and factory workers drafted into People's Liberation Army uniforms that were too thin for Korean winter. His M1 cracked steadily. 8 rounds. Ping, reload 8 more rounds. The Chinese wave broke against Marine fire like water against stone. "Third wave forming up," Thompson warned. That's when Martinez understood. The Chinese weren't just attacking Fox Company. They were attacking the entire perimeter simultaneously. 20 positions, 20 last stands. Except Marines don't make last stands. They make fighting withdrawals. Hydro 634 hours. Message tally board shows. Incoming 23, outgoing 47. Martinez. Thompson slid into the fighting position, his radio handset crackling with reports from across the perimeter. Battalions pulling back to secondary positions. "We're the rear guard. How long do we hold, sir?" Thompson checked his watch. 30 minutes. Then we displaced to Rally Point Baker. 30 minutes. Martinez had fired 64 rounds. He had 32 left. Simple math, he needed to make each shot count twice as much. The fourth wave came with mortars. Chinese 82mm shells began falling among the Marine positions with mathematically precise timing. The gunners had pre-registered their targets, walking their rounds across predetermined coordinates. But they hadn't counted on Marines who moved like water. "Displacing," Thompson signaled. Fox Company flowed backward through the snow in a coordinated withdrawal that would have impressed Napoleon's Grande Armée. Every Marine knew his position. Every weapon system had overlapping fields of fire. Every movement was covered by someone else's rifle. The Chinese followed, straight into the next killing zone. DT, Chapter 3, Numbers that Crush Doubt and Tactics. The mathematics of Chosin were brutal and simple. 120,000 Chinese troops versus 20,000 Marines. But numbers tell only half the story. Each Marine carried 60 pounds of equipment in -30-degree weather and still maintained a fighting advance of 2 miles per hour over mountain terrain. Chinese troops, traveling light with minimal winter gear, could barely maintain formation in the same conditions. American logistics meant hot food every 12 hours. Chinese logistics meant cold rice, when there was rice at all. Here's what the Chinese discovered about American supply systems. A single Marine rifle company consumed 2,000 pounds of ammunition per day in heavy combat. The Chinese had calculated for 200 pounds per day per unit. They were off by a factor of 10. Grid reference 14 127-degree Kafiti supply drop zone alpha at 1400 hours, November 29th. Air Force C-119 flying boxcars began dropping supplies to Marines scattered across the reservoir. Each aircraft carried 20,000 pounds of ammunition, medical supplies, and rations. The Chinese watched in amazement as wooden pallets crashed through the ice, splitting open to reveal cases of 30-06 ammunition, morphine syrettes, and cans of beef stew. How do they do this? Chinese Colonel Wei asked his aide as another supply drop drifted toward Marine positions. The Americans have many aircraft, Colonel. No, not just aircraft. They drop exactly what is needed, exactly where it is needed. Look, medical supplies to the aid station, ammunition to the rifle companies, food to the command post. This is not random. This is a system. The Marine system worked like this. Every radio operator carried a standardized request format. Grid coordinates, unit designation, supply type, quantity, drop zone marking method. The entire request took 30 seconds to transmit. From transmission to delivery, 47 minutes average. The Chinese supply system required written requests that traveled through 5 levels of command approval. From request to delivery, 8 days minimum. In a battle lasting 17 days, those 47 minutes meant everything. Message board update. Supply drops completed 67, requested 67. But the real difference wasn't logistics. It was the M1 Garand itself. The Chinese carried weapons designed for mass production and peasant armies. Bolt-action Mosin Nagants that fired slowly but worked in any weather. Except Korean winter wasn't any weather. It was a mechanical nightmare that froze lubricants, cracked metal, and jammed moving parts. The M1 Garand was different. Its gas-operated system used the rifle's own firing to cycle the action. More moving parts meant more things could break, but also more redundancy when things did break. Marine armorers had spent 4 years perfecting cold weather modifications that kept Garands firing when everything else seized up. The result, Marines maintained a sustained rate of fire 3 times higher than Chinese infantry. But rate of fire was just numbers. What mattered was accuracy. Marine training emphasized aimed fire at known distances. Every Marine qualified annually at ranges from 200 to 500 yards. They knew their rifle's ballistics by heart. At 200 yards, aim dead center. At 300 yards, hold 6 inches high. At 400 yards, hold 12 inches high. The Chinese trained for mass fire at close range. Acceptable accuracy, minute of man at 100 yards. At Chosin, most engagements occurred at 200-300 yards across open snowfields. Every Chinese attack walked into what Marines called the beaten zone, that lethal area where concentrated rifle fire from an entire company converged on a single killing ground. 847 hours engagement report. Enemy casualties estimated 400 plus. Marine casualties 12. They keep coming straight at us. Sergeant Martinez observed as the 6th Chinese assault of the morning formed up on the ridgeline. Same approach, same formation. Why don't they adapt? Lieutenant Thompson lowered his binoculars. Because they're fighting the last war, Martinez. They beat the nationalists with human waves and political fervor. They think we're just another army that will break under pressure. The 7th wave came at 0900 hours. This time, Chinese officers had learned enough to approach from multiple directions simultaneously, splitting Marine fire across a wider front. It didn't matter. Marine rifle companies were organized around the principle of interlocking fields of fire. Every position could see and support every other position. When Chinese troops appeared on the northern approach, Marines on the eastern slope shifted fire to cover them. When the attack developed from 3 directions simultaneously, 3 Marine platoons simply adjusted their sectors and maintained the same devastating rate of aimed fire. The Chinese wave broke in 8 minutes. 8th wave forming up, Thompson reported, checking his watch. Right on schedule. Every 45 minutes like clockwork. That's when the Marines realized something crucial. The Chinese weren't adapting their tactics because they couldn't. Their entire doctrine was built around overwhelming smaller forces with superior numbers and accepting massive casualties to achieve tactical objectives. Against an enemy that refused to be overwhelmed, the doctrine became a suicide machine. Chapter 4. Enemy SIGINT and Turning Point. Colonel Wei Guangming lowered his field telephone and stared at the tactical map spread across his frozen command table. Red pins marked Chinese positions. Blue pins marked American Marines. For 3 days, the red pins had advanced. The blue pins had retreated. But the Americans weren't retreating like a beaten army. "Report from 9th Company, sir," his aide announced. "They've taken the Americans' forward positions at Hill 1081. Wei nodded absently. On paper, it looked like victory. Chinese forces had pushed the Marines back 15 miles. They'd captured abandoned equipment, overrun defensive positions, forced the Americans into an increasingly narrow perimeter around the port of Hungnam. But something was wrong with this victory. "Casualties?" we asked. 9th Company reports. "Heavy losses, sir." "Define heavy." The aide consulted his notes. 70%, Colonel." Wei felt cold that had nothing to do with Korean winter. "To capture empty positions?" "The Americans. They don't fight like other armies, sir. When they retreat, every step is covered by fire. Every position is booby-trapped. Every withdrawal draws us into another killing zone. Clock shows 1520 hours, December 1st, 1950. Wei had fought the Japanese for 8 years. He'd fought Chiang Kai-shek's nationalists for 4 more. He understood retreat. Armies ran when they were beaten. They abandoned equipment, left wounded behind, dissolved into individual soldiers trying to save their own lives. These Americans were doing something different. "Show me the intercepts," Wei ordered. His signals officer spread captured American radio traffic across the table. Even translated into Chinese, the messages revealed a disturbing pattern. "Fox Company displacing to Rally Point Charlie. Will maintain contact with Gulf Company until relieved. Supply drop requested grid 41-1207. Medical supplies priority. Will mark with smoke. Rear guard established. Advise when Dog Company clears checkpoint." "This is not the language of defeat," Wei said quietly. "No, sir. They're coordinating. Every unit knows where every other unit is positioned. Every movement is planned. Every withdrawal leads to prepared positions with overlapping fields of fire." Wei studied the pattern of American retreats on his map. Instead of random flight, he saw something that looked almost like choreography. The Marines fell back in phases, each unit covering the others, each position carefully selected to maximize defensive advantage. "They're not retreating," he realized. "They're advancing toward the sea." Political Commissar Zhang stepped forward. "Comrade Colonel, American morale is clearly broken. Our forces have captured significant territory. The enemy flees before our righteous assault." Wei looked at Zhang with the expression of a professional soldier forced to work with an ideological amateur. "Commissar, in 3 days of righteous assault, how many American prisoners have we taken?" Zhang consulted his reports. "The Americans. They carry away their wounded comrade colonel. This indicates weak revolutionary spirit. A truly motivated force would—" "We've taken 43 prisoners," Wei interrupted. 43 Americans out of 20,000. "Do you know what that means?" Jean remained silent. "It means they're not broken. They're angry." 1547 hours, intelligence summary board. Enemy prisoners 43. Estimated enemy strength 19,000 plus. The truth was spreading through Chinese ranks faster than official reports. Soldiers whispered it around frozen campfires. Officers discussed it in careful euphemisms during staff meetings. The Americans weren't just fighting. They were winning every individual engagement while losing ground. "Look at our casualty reports," Wei told his staff. "Every day we advance. Every day we lose more men than the enemy. This is not sustainable mathematics." Captain Liu, Wei's intelligence officer, had been studying captured American equipment. "Colonel, I've examined their rifles, their radios, their medical supplies. Everything is designed for sustained combat in extreme conditions. These men came prepared for a long fight." Wei picked up a captured M1 Garand, feeling the rifle's weight and balance. "How many rounds does this carry?" 8, sir. "But they fire semi-automatic." Each Marine can maintain twice the rate of fire of our bolt-action rifles. And their ammunition supply? Unlimited, sir. They receive daily resupply by air. Each Marine carries 120 rounds minimum. Our soldiers carry 60 rounds and receive resupply. When available, Wei set down the rifle. The mathematics were becoming clear, and they weren't encouraging. Sir? Captain Liu pointed to a new intelligence report. The Americans are requesting close air support for tomorrow's movement. Grid coordinates indicate they're planning to advance south toward Hungnam. Advance? I thought you said they were retreating. That's what I don't understand, Colonel. On paper, we're winning. We've pushed them back 60 kilometers. We control the high ground. We have numerical superiority. But they're moving like an army that expects to win. Wei studied the map one more time. Blue pins clustered around the port city where American ships waited offshore. Red pins scattered across a wide area, pursuing an enemy that somehow inflicted casualties faster than it received them. Send a message to Division Headquarters, Wei ordered. Request immediate reinforcement. 2 additional regiments minimum. Sir? We already outnumber the Americans 6-1. Wei looked at his aide with the expression of a man who'd just discovered that mathematics sometimes lies. Not anymore, Captain. Not anymore. Chapter 5. Epilogue. Moral and Next Hook. December 11th, 1950. Hungnam Harbor, North Korea. Colonel Wei stood on a frozen hillside overlooking the port and watched the impossible happen before his eyes. 70 American ships stretched across the horizon like a small city floating on dark water. Landing craft moved between the ships and shore in endless succession, loading Marines, equipment, and Korean refugees with mechanical precision. Sir? His aide handed him field glasses. The Americans are... They're taking civilians with them. Wei adjusted the focus and saw something that redefined his understanding of warfare. Marines weren't just evacuating themselves. They were loading Korean families onto transport ships, helping children climb gangways, carrying elderly refugees in stretchers designed for wounded soldiers. An army in retreat doesn't save civilians. It abandons them. How many? We asked. Intelligence estimates 100,000 refugees, sir, plus 7,500 Marines and their equipment. Wei lowered the glasses. In 17 days of combat, Chinese forces had suffered over 40,000 casualties, pushing the Americans toward this evacuation. They'd won every engagement on paper, captured territory, forced retreats, maintained tactical initiative. But they'd lost the war. Look at them, Wei said quietly. Perfect order, no panic. No abandoned equipment. They're loading tanks onto ships like they're moving furniture. The aide followed his colonel's gaze toward the beach, where Marines directed traffic with the casual efficiency of men who'd done this before. Jeeps rolled up gangways. Artillery pieces swung aboard landing craft in cargo nets. Even the wounded moved in organized groups, supported by corpsmen who'd kept them alive through the frozen hell of the past 2 weeks. Colonel, the Americans, they fought their way out. Wei nodded. The phrase captured something that Chinese doctrine couldn't explain. Surrounded armies surrender or die. They don't fight their way to safety while carrying refugees and maintaining unit cohesion. These Marines had done something unprecedented in modern warfare. They'd conducted a fighting withdrawal across 78 miles of mountain terrain in sub-zero weather while maintaining tactical integrity and inflicting disproportionate casualties on a numerically superior enemy. Sir, what do we report to headquarters? We considered the question that would define his career. How do you explain a victory that feels like defeat? How do you report that 120,000 troops failed to destroy 20,000 surrounded Marines? Tell them the truth, Wei decided. The Americans have evacuated North Korea. Mission accomplished. But privately, Wei knew something different. He'd watched the most professional military withdrawal in history. Marines hadn't retreated from Chosin. They'd advanced in a different direction, bringing their wounded, their equipment, and their dignity, and 100,000 Korean civilians who would otherwise have died. The last Marine transport cleared Hungnam Harbor at 1400 hours on December 24th, Christmas Eve. As the ships disappeared beyond the horizon, Chinese forces moved into the abandoned port facilities. They found them completely intact. No sabotage, no booby traps. Even the docks were left operational. Professional soldiers, Wei realized, don't destroy what civilians might need. That's when Colonel Wei understood what he'd witnessed at Chosin. Not just tactical excellence or superior firepower or better logistics. Something more fundamental. He'd watched an army that fought not just to win, but to deserve victory. The Marine withdrawal from Chosin became legendary not because 20,000 men survived impossible odds, though they did. Not because they maintained unit cohesion while surrounded and outnumbered, though they did that too. It became legendary because they proved that in warfare, numbers matter less than character. That professional soldiers fight differently than conscripts. That an army which protects civilians while under fire is fighting for something worth the cost. The Chinese called it the greatest victory in People's Liberation Army history. They'd pushed the Americans out of North Korea and restored territorial integrity to their ally. But privately, officers like Wei knew they'd learned a harder lesson. Some victories aren't worth winning. Some enemies are more dangerous in retreat than in attack. And some armies, when you think you have them beaten, are just getting started. Want to know what happened when these same Marines hit the beaches at Incheon? How MacArthur's amphibious assault caught the North Koreans completely off guard? Subscribe so you don't miss that story, because sometimes the best defense really is a good offense. What do you think defined the Marines at Chosin? Superior training, better equipment, or something else entirely? Share your thoughts in the comments, and if this story made you appreciate Marine Corps resolve, share it with someone who needs to hear about American fighting spirit. Because some battles are won with bullets, others are won with character. And at Chosin, character was enough.